Okay, well, I was wondering quite what to do and how to do it, given that this is the first in the sequence of this fantastic series that we have laid out before us. And of course, to give true credit, it's actually Tanya who drew everything together and cajoled the rest of us to get on board, but she did all the hard work, so well done. And I think part of the purpose is to introduce to those who aren't yet familiar with the idea of a green criminology and its broad scope, what it might mean, what it might encompass, but of course also engage in debate and carry forward debate and elaboration of these ideas to those who are very familiar with it. So that's a very worthy set of dual purposes, but it makes it very difficult to decide what to do for a kind of opening set of remarks. So I was kind of wondering what to do, and Abby kind of kindly put it in a kind sort of way by saying, he didn't have to say, well, you've been around for a long time, which is more or less what Tanya just said. You're ancient, you've been here for a long time. And he said, well, why don't you explore the critical roots of where all this came from? I took to be the same kind of invitation to say, reflect back on things. So I thought that was actually quite a good idea, because we are at a point now where, with ESRC support for this series, the idea of green criminology is maturing. It's got some recognition internationally, but it came from a very small but quite interesting set of points of emergence. And so I wanted to just reflect on some of that and then say a bit about where it might all be going. So there's some PowerPoints to look at when you get kind of looking at me. I don't want to try and read some of the text because it helped me to bring together what I was trying to do. But we'll have time for questions afterwards as well. So I did want to reflect on some of the influences of biography that have shaped me in the course of working through my understanding of the development of some theories and concepts in green criminology. And then, as Tanya says, Abby will bring us up to date later with some thoughts on how these roots led to shoots, and he's going to talk about the flourishing field of four-leaf clovers. So there's a series of metaphors which he will then actually explain what four-leaf clovers are about. Okay, let's go back to some of the early thinking. In the 1998 essay in the Theoretical Criminology special issue that Piers Burnham and I did, I suggested that there was a case to be made for the enhancement of environmental consciousness in criminology and the development of a green perspective. And I said that in doing this, my aims were both modest and ambitious. Modest in the sense that I was making no claim to put forward a theory for or of a green criminology, but simply aiming to emphasise the importance of thinking green as a sensitising perspective in the criminological field. But ambitious in the sense that I argue that such a perspective should now find a prominent place on the criminological agenda. And I think both here and subsequently I was arguing that green issues open up a wide range of possibilities for interdisciplinary work, and that seems to have resonated. There's quite a lot of interest in the idea of interdisciplinary work around green themes within criminology, crossing across the social sciences with the natural sciences, and seeing criminologists collaborating with economists, geographers, biologists, health specialists, human rights workers, lawyers and others, as I put it at the time, and of course things like conservation criminology and crime science interest in these areas have emerged as well. And there's a lot more opportunities for that kind of interdisciplinary work. I opened the 1998 paper by saying I wanted to address four key questions arising from a title about a proposal for a perspective for the green criminology. First, why a green criminology? Second, what kinds of existing work might this build on? Third, what theoretical issues are opened up? And finally, what directions might a green criminology pursue? And perhaps just to get started here, those four questions might merit some brief revisiting. So, why a green criminology? Well, as I've said, I was certainly arguing that the arrival on the environmental of the environmental agenda in criminology was overdue, given the strength of engagement with green issues in many other academic subjects. And I felt that criminology could easily accommodate this. criminology then, as now, is a fairly fragmented field of inquiry, and that fragmentation reflects other processes of fragmentation in the academy and other social institutions, and it was occurring in the sociology of law and deviance and criminology broadly at the time. So adding a green perspective seemed actually the right moment to be doing that, and taking advantage of an awareness of criminology is not a monolithic sort of fixed body of knowledge or anything like that. It's actually a very fragmented and fluid field. What kinds of work might this build on? Well, very importantly, green criminology didn't just appear, of course, and I felt it absolutely had to be emphasised that there have been many past studies which share these concerns and have explored dimensions of environmental damage, crime and victimisation. And while a number of these can be seen as purely criminological, others crossed disciplinary boundaries. And if you look back at just through fairly traditional criminological publications and things like the British Journal of Criminology from the 70s and the 80s onwards, there's a lot of work on pollution and its regulation, then of course corporate crime, its impact on environment and workers, wonderful stuff about early impacts of factories on both workers and pollution levels and things like that, organised crime and corruption, enforcement and military impacts on the environment and populations, injury to land-based and aquatic wildlife, and relatedly the policing of such offences. So there was by no means a shortage of criminological thinking about these issues, but perhaps it hadn't been brought together or viewed and reflected through a kind of green perspective. And Rob White's recently also made this point about the antecedents of green criminology in an essay that I think he's done for a book that Tanya and colleagues have edited. What theoretical issues are opened up? Well, I was advancing the idea of a green perspective rather than a theory. And in that I was very influenced by a colleague, Ken Plummer, who'd done work around labelling theories. Ken was a product of the kind of sociology of deviance and de-deviancy theories, and was saying, well, labelling theory is misconceived because it's not actually a theory at all, it's a perspective, and it's kind of concept category. And in the same way I was saying, well, a green criminology shouldn't be equated with a particular theory or proposition, but should be seen as a perspective. And in that sense, it can harbour several diverse theoretical positions. As a perspective, it can be associated then with any number of conceivable green theoretical positions, such as Marxism, feminism, anthropology, functionalism or postmodernism, and others. And I'll say a bit more about that later. Very early on I was saying, and I think generally it's accepted, that this is kind of umbrella term. It's a way to get debate going, to stimulate rather than to be definitive about a theoretical proposition. And finally, what directions might a green criminology pursue? My point at the time, and perhaps still, was that the significance and seriousness of crimes against the environment had not received full acknowledgement as a field of study in criminology, despite being a matter of global significance. As I started to look at it, at the topic early on, I was quite interested and amazed to find that United Nations affiliates, such as UNICRI in Italy, had actually done quite a lot of work on the international legal framework relating to environmental harms and crimes. So it seemed to me that there was, right from the start, an international agenda that we could engage with about environmental rights, interaction with human rights, and with the work of non-governmental organisations. And of course that in a way has continued, and I think many of us do draw inspiration from and on the work of various NGOs that do a lot of incredible path-breaking and scrupulous work on environmental issues in ways that academics sometimes find it hard to do, in agencies such as the Environmental Investigation Agency or Greenpeace and so on. And of course UNICRI itself has retained an interest in this and produced a special publication arising from the first green criminology panel that was held at the American Society of Criminology just a few years ago. So I could see the international dimension being an obvious one for it to try and develop. In the 1998 paper, I also suggested that the link between political protest to preserve human and environmental rights today and the human and environmental rights of future generations should be of interest. And I think that's also led by a kind of circuitous route to some work that Abby and I have been doing about rights generally, but also about protest movements, which seems to have kind of dropped off the radar of some the sociology or sociology and social movement, sociology and social movements, and we're kind of tinkering with cultural criminology and trying to paint that a little bit green with a spray can, I think, to bring together green criminology and cultural criminology. And I think Annie might say a little bit more about that. What I think was interesting in terms of an intellectual history is that in terms of publication chronology, my 1998 essay and the journal special issue on green criminology that Piers Burton and I edited were preceded by some years by Mike Lynch's piece on the greening of criminology, a perspective on the 1990s in an issue of the Critical Criminologist. And I'll say a bit more about that in a moment, but I just think that this offers me a moment to just say, well, let's look at that period of the 1990s and why suddenly there was this articulation of something called green criminology. Because it was happening in several different places at more or less the same time. People thinking about it in different ways. And it's worth just noting some of the possible influences on those of a certain age, as I say, who were simultaneously thinking about these issues to do with green issues, animal rights, environmental protest, ecofeminism, and so on. First of all, it was a generation that was either teaching or had been strongly influenced by new and critical developments in criminology, or actually the sociology of deviance, when criminology wasn't in favour, it was kind of anti-criminology, through North American-led new deviancy theories, which were particularly emphasising of a sensitivity to the plight of the powerless and the marginalised. So that's kind of the conditioning for part of the generation. A Marxist criminology followed, highlighting the crimes of the powerful, and that frameworks of law represent entrenched biases and interests largely hinge on the protection of property rights. And you can see how this leads to an interest in whose property, who owns property, on what basis are some enabled to destroy property, to deal with land in certain ways, and hence the environment. Feminist criminology, of course, made a huge impact on those of a critical bent, emphasising the crimes of men, the victimisation of women, the marginalisation of women as actors, as criminals, as victims, as protesters. And within that, and related studies across the humanities, not just criminology, of course, there was the story about men as responsible for the violation of women, of civilised life, and of the environment and other species. And the work by Collard and Kamshushi was particularly influential when I came across that, looking at male violence towards women and male violence towards the environment. And peacemaking criminology didn't make a big an impact in the UK, or it made a little impact in continental Europe, I think, but didn't make as big an impact as in the States. But nonetheless, those themes of respect, of conflict mediation, of reconciliation, you can easily see how they translate into an idea that we should be treating the planet differently and less aggressively. So all of those things were certainly intellectual influences on me and many of those of my generation, which kind of takes me back to Mike Lynch and his original piece, his 1990 contribution. Because this was published in a newsletter magazine for critical criminologists of like minds in North America. But the magazine, and hence the article, had, as Mike Lynch acknowledges, really rather limited circulation in North America, and as far as I'm aware, virtually none beyond. So simply put, I and many others with similar interests around this time were just unaware of the article for many years to come. And I didn't see the article until Mike sent it to me after we'd published the 1998 piece, and he sent me various bits of work that he and other colleagues had done, which we then were able to put in the Ashgate volume. But it is worth remembering how the world has changed just in terms of communications and our access to publications through the web, through email and so on. It just makes awareness of what's going on absolutely different to how it was 10, certainly 15 years ago. So the point about all of that, in a way, is not so much that Lynch was first, though that certainly does deserve acknowledgement, but that I think it's interesting that between around 1990 and the end of that decade, the time was obviously right for the emergence of a green criminology, as a number of scholars around the world started to write and communicate about similar issues and concerns. These ideas obviously represented something broad in the air, part of the zeitgeist. They indicated a sensibility and awareness among social and natural scientists of the challenges posed by environmental and related problems. In terms of my personal engagement, early thoughts about a green criminology didn't actually come solely from criminology, but were developed partly from an interest in pollution that followed from an interest in public health and teaching sociology of health and medicine. Because a staple of sociology of health and medicine is comparing the morbidity and mortality of the rich and the poor. So years later, when encountering the arguments of environmental justice, the work of Lynch and Strutesky on exposure to toxins and so forth, all made absolute sense to me, even if it didn't seem like criminology to some people. And Mike and Paul are constantly making this argument, this kind of data and this kind of argument is criminology. It made sense to me because it's about the injustices that govern life expectancy. And I think that's absolutely right for criminology concerned with justice to be looking at those kinds of issues. But again, that's partly also I think about the interdisciplinary flavour of a green perspective. You can draw on sociology of health, medicine, those kinds of bits of data, as well as criminology. Those thoughts were crystallised and put on overhead projector slides because it was too early for PowerPoint, for a series of undergraduate lectures in 1996 where I used the term a green criminology. And that was to complement lectures on other new horizons in criminology. So again, back to this idea of the fragmentation and the emergence of new perspectives in criminology. It was a course I was running that was about with a section on new horizons. So a green perspective was to sit alongside a lecture on feminist criminology, on postmodern criminology, on comparative criminology, on historical criminology. One of the first essays I wrote around that went into a book called The New European Criminology that Vincenzo Ruggiero and Ian Taylor and I edited. We put that essay in a section called New Horizons. So it was all about trying to contribute towards new ways of thinking about criminological issues. But as I say, one of the really interesting things about the period is that totally independently, the same issues and questions, and indeed the same label of a green criminology or a green approach or whatever, were emerging and were being thought about by colleagues in Australia, in the United States, in Canada, in Europe. Again, this is pre-email. I made contact with Piers Byrne by letter, remember letters? Write them, post, wait 2 weeks for a reply. In around late 1996, I think, as I was thinking about all this, and I read somewhere about a conference paper that Piers had given on animals and justice issues, and we began to correspond and collaborate, leading to the theoretical criminology special issue in 1998. And we generally didn't really know, we knew of hardly anybody else at the time who was doing similar kinds of work. But we did gather colleagues together, of course, to then produce the 1998 issue. Sometimes coming from directions where the work hadn't yet taken. And Nick was the contributor to that early volume. Had done some thinking about green issues, but kind of came to it from a slightly different way to where we were coming from. So that's great, because we were bringing together a community. So as well as Mike Lynch and Paul Strutesky, Mary Clifford and others in the States were working on this, Rob White in Australia, Ragnhild Sulland in Norway, Gorash Mesko and colleagues in Slovenia, and Rhys Walters in the UK, and now back in Australia. So all of these colleagues were moving things forward, first quite independently, and then of course there's younger people come along and start moving things forward even more rapidly. What I want to do now is just say a few things about the field of study and conceptualising and typologising harms and crimes, some of which will be very familiar to some people, but not to all, so I'll go over it, and then move towards some thoughts about more new horizons or more emerging questions and directions. So, first of all, a bit about green criminology as a field of study. Green criminology is, as I've said, a kind of a meeting point. It's not intended to be a unitary enterprise. I don't think anyone's claiming that it's pure in any sense. It's not a criminology. It's something about diversity sets of work and directions and things to pursue as a research agenda. It's most helpfully seen as a capacious, which is Abby's word, it's a nice word, encompass it, an evolving perspective. It's a loose framework, it's a set of intellectual, empirical and political orientations towards problems. Importantly, I think, and this is both epistemologically what it's about, but also kind of politically what it's about, it's an open perspective and it's an open framework. It arises, for me at least, from within the traditions of critical criminology, but it doesn't have to be associated solely with critical criminology. At the same time, it actively seeks inter and multidisciplinary engagement, and it's both a network of interested individuals and a forum for sharing and debating ideas. And that's very much what this series of seminars is about, and the recent conference in Delft, Netherlands as well, of course. So unsurprisingly, there's not universal agreement on the appropriate name or label for this subfield or perspective. And there's various terms and ways of approaching the topic that have been expressed within the literature. So Ron White suggested that the term environmental criminology should be reclaimed from what is more properly considered place-based criminology to cover the study of environmental harms and threats. And this usage would obviously be a better and more obvious reflection of the way that the environment is today used, most frequently in everyday discussion, in media, and so on. The criminology, though, it has suffered the drawback of being too easily confused with its longer established usage in criminology to describe relationships between the incidence of crime and the spatial features of the built and urban environment. Although, interestingly, Tony Bottoms, in the latest edition of the Oxford Handbook of Criminology, he's written about 3 or 4 editions running the chapter on environmental criminology, or place-based criminology, or now socio-spatial criminology. He's suggesting that in the latest edition, he said, he called it developing socio-spatial criminology, is one reason for the name change being given by the author as the possible confusion that might arise if environmental crime were used as a description, because it is sometimes used to refer to the important emerging field of green criminology, which I thought was a nice acknowledgement from traditional criminology, very traditional criminology, of the emergence of this important field. So Rob might want to have another go at reclaiming environmental criminology, but we'll see. Without abandoning this endeavour, Rob White's also offered the term eco-global criminology to refer to a criminological approach that is informed by ecological considerations, by critical analysis that is worldwide in its scale and perspective. So that's really about the international global agenda. In a related vein, Rhys Walters has suggested that the term eco-crime is helpful, capable of encapsulating a broad range of existing legal definitions, as well as sociological analyses. And there's other formulations as well, such as conservation criminology, concerned with evidence-based practice addressing environmental crimes and risks. And there's a possibility of a green cultural criminology emerging as well, as I mentioned. Jeff Ferrell's written a nice essay on that for the Handbook of Green Criminology that Abby and I have edited, and Abby and I have done a bit of work on that. And really that hinges on the idea of consumer society as enormously productive of waste, and the crisis that we have around how to deal with waste, depending on economies that are shaped by cultural forces that drive marketing, media images of consumption of waste. And Abby might say a bit more about this. Criminology concerned with speciesism is very well established, highlighting Hosger's non-human species and views that see these as inferior to humans and exploitable. And we've heard that there will be a couple of sessions relating to both the wildlife trade and species-related issues within the sequence of seminars, so that's great. But broadly speaking, at this stage of its development, it does seem that criminologists most frequently employ the term green criminology to describe this range of issues and topics. I think it is worth noting that so far, and it's a fairly short history so far, this has been a very Western, transatlantic, global North-dominated literature, communicating in English with little translated work. And there probably are other research literatures in other languages, in other areas, not necessarily criminology or law or social science that will be highly relevant, and we need to kind of seek those out. Colleagues in Slovenia draw attention to the work by Pecker in 1981 that put forward early warnings about new ecologically damaging forms of criminality. But because this wasn't really picked up on in Slovenia itself, and it was never translated, a green criminology didn't emerge at the time in Slovenia. So there's probably, again, little pockets of the history that we're not aware of, and we just need to bear in mind that if we want to have an international conversation and make an international impact, we should be looking at these other hidden bits of contributions to the literature. These points aside, all of these different terms, all of these different literatures represent similar frameworks, and they share a common interest in the biophysical and socio-economic consequences of various sources of threat and damage to the environment. Markets and CAD in relation to environmental crime markets. So I refer you to the work by Passers and to Liz Bishop's work on e-waste there. I hope to actually use some of that to develop further the part of the formulation that we've got about secondary or symbiotic green crimes and harms. Rob White's also produced a typology, a threefold typology, which is very useful, relating to brown, green and white issues. Brown issues being defined in terms of urban life and pollution, green issues referring to conservation matters of wilderness areas, and white issues referring to the impact of new technologies and laboratory practices. There's a useful set of headings and kind of typology from Lynch and Strateski, identifying 4 problems with which a green criminology should be concerned. Critical examination of environmental policies, environmental justice and the unequal distribution of environmental hazards, the health impacts of exposure to environmental toxins, and the links between toxic exposure and criminal behaviour. But again, I think that latter one, as I said to Paul at the Delft conference where they were presenting some of this work, once upon a time, critical criminologists would have looked at that kind of association and seen something that was really seen as kind of reductionist and almost positivist. And I think we've matured, I hope we've matured in terms of critical criminology to be actually really much more concerned about what the evidence is saying in terms of impacts on people and their health and their mortality and so on. So that evidence really does matter for a critical green criminology. That's some of the typologies that exist, and of course there are many others. What they build on or what they produce are ways of thinking about green issues. But of course we also draw on traditional and existing criminological theories to make sense of green issues. And there are various theoretical influences and directions that have shaped my thinking and now shaped the thinking of others about green issues. And it's entirely legitimate and valuable that we should indeed draw upon existing traditions within criminology in order to develop a green criminology. Criminology has always proceeded rather erratically. We can convey, as we do for our students, a sense of progress based on empirical investigation, theorisation, analysis and debate. But the real history of the field is probably a bit different to the rather neat way that textbooks describe it. First there was this, then there was that, then there's the other. Paradigms come and go, revisionist rethinking happens, but as Jock Young quite nicely put it, criminology is particularly prone to amnesia about its own intellectual history. And this is a condition that's corrected as old theories and insights are remembered, revived, reinterpreted, and applied anew. And I think that's entirely right, and green criminology can do a lot by sort of saying, well, actually this is a newish perspective, what can we borrow or reinterpret or reinvent from existing theory? So, for example, Bob Agnew at the moment is currently applying classic criminological theories to his analysis of environmental harms caused by everyday behaviours. And I'll say a very little bit more about that later, but Abby will say a bit more, I think. And very interestingly, like Lynch has written recently about the eco-city, essentially an approach to small-scale community living organised according to green principles, shaping energy, transport and economic systems. And he suggests that such an approach to social organisation offers benefits to the improvement of human life by reducing crime. So he then links that kind of notion of a community organised according to green principles with the premises of good old-fashioned Chicago social disorganisation theory. And he suggests that crime, social disorganisation theory suggests that crime is more likely to occur in disorganised communities because those communities lack a sense of community, effective formal, informal social control, access to resources and effective mechanisms for mobilising human capital, and that if you have an eco-city kind of environment or shared community and common values, generates enhanced neighbourhood investment in informal social control and therefore a reduction in antisocial behaviour and criminal organisation. So Lynch is proposing a different sort of map for organising communities that then connect very nicely back to community-based theories from the Chicago School. That's a nice example of using or reconnecting traditional and classic criminological theory. There's another one that I quite like that is also found in a chapter in the handbook of green criminology, where colleagues who aren't criminologists at all, biological or environmental scientists interested in the application of green environments to influencing human behaviour, whether it's health or mental health or recovery from ill health, whatever. They're talking about how kind of reorientation of the traditional notions about crime prevention through environmental design. If you read those early crime prevention through environmental design kinds of essays and articles, which were very, very thoughtful in their own way, they often suggested things like planting prickly bushes to create defensible space and barriers. I think kind of a new version of this would be rather more emphasising the aesthetic, civilising and calming effect of enhancing the greenness of your environment to try and reduce criminal behaviour. So I think there's different ways of thinking about some of the classic traditional criminological perspectives that we encounter through a green prism. As I noted earlier, the protection of I'll skip a bit because I'm running out of time. I think the peacemaking perspective in US criminology and some of Braithwaite's writing on shading and reintegration, both being areas of work which embrace dispute resolution through dialogue and mediation, are worth further consideration. The nature of the environment as property which gives rise to dispute, or as a provider of resources which are fought over, or as a site of a range of offences from corporate crime to juvenile vandalism, suggests to me that both peacemaking and reintegrative shaming are definitely worth further exploration and development. And those theoretical pathways also connect very well with the work of those that champion or provide voice for the marginalised, for the victimised, for the powerless and exploited. Feminist environmental justice and animal rights perspectives making major contributions here. Matthew's work on victimisation is worth noting here, as is the use of restorative justice circles as a practical tool promoted as part of the proposal for a law of ecocide, which I'll come on to in a moment. So that's just a quick run through various theoretical directions that I think have made some impact and are developing. There is one area where I think there's been a relative lack of theoretical research momentum that has surprised me. And this is that given the connections and comparisons which can be made between male violence against nature and against women, and the role that women have played in resistance and advocacy concerning the environment and intergenerational justice, it seems surprising that feminist criminology and related disciplinary areas have not played a more powerful or prominent role in the development of green criminology, though of course there are the works of Solon, Bernardo, and others that make serious and significant contributions to this gap. But I think that is a slight surprise. I want to work towards a conclusion by presenting yet another kind of fourfold typology. And I think that for present purposes, reflecting on what I've talked about so far, we can look at problems and concepts in terms of the following dimensions. The personal and the political, the socio-economic, or the domestic, the globally interconnected, transnational, and the intergenerational and the future. So, just let me run through those and some of the thoughts that occur to me in this developing trends and areas and directions that we can pursue for the future. I do think public health is an important connection to make for green criminology. This is partly about impact on the person, and as I said, this was an important starting point for some of my thinking about green criminology. But of course, it's public health that actually drives a great deal of environmental regulation and improvement. It's not necessarily criminal law itself, public health. In the modern period of industrialisation, the ways in which early legislators sought to deal with environmental matters were through public health or resource statutes, and less frequently through the criminal law. The latter criminal law has been targeted against industrial polluters who pollute water or land, but again, what's at stake there is generally public health dangers or public nuisance problems. If you're not familiar with it, then the work that Lynch and Strateski have done about hazards and health consequences for human populations associated with the presence of toxic waste and pesticides and dioxin and so on is really worth looking at. And I think in terms of the evidence available, or the data that's available to critical green criminologists, which is often hard to come by, they're pointing out that criminologists can employ medical evidence as well as criminal justice evidence to identify issues and explore issues where other forms of data don't necessarily exist. The authors note that lawmaking processes that define toxic harms are heavily influenced by corporate interests expressed in corporate-sponsored research and public relations campaigns, and suggest that really we should be looking at, as was the case with the tobacco industry, how manufacturers of certain products manipulate scientific data to influence conclusions concerning the safety of their products and byproducts, and hide important findings from public and consumers. I think there's a kind of public safety campaigning role for green criminology about information that's hidden from the public as consumers, and that would provide a useful impact. In the UK research environment at the moment, we're very concerned about research that makes an impact. I think this is a direction for green criminology that could make an impact. It's kind of exposing criminology. Related to that, we need to further develop work on environmental victimology. Christopher Williams did some early work on that, and others, Matthew and Stephen Farrell and others. Dr. French are doing more work about victimology and environmental green victimology now, and I think there's a lot still to be done there. It seems an area that we have under-theorised or under-developed. Williams concluded that we need urgently to develop better and broader understandings of environmental victimisation, and through these understandings to develop a consensus on the relationships between justice norms and the sometimes conflicting demands of human security, by which he means human interests. The domestic, by which I mean spheres such as the home, local, national, covering everyday actions and behaviours, consumption and waste, everyday ecocide, by which I mean that much of the environmentally harmful activity that we're concerned with is a product of the economic forces that require and enable production and consumption. I mean, Chancellor has recently been working on this nice paper, not yet published at a Cambridge seminar recently, where he's basically saying it's the economy stupid. I mean, everything is based on the model of the economy that we have that produces the public bads. We are complicit in, as consumers, as well. So the larger scale and indeed planet-wide instances and sequences of damage and destruction done to the environment are generally simply symptoms of the quiet, slow ecocide produced by the way that we, or at least and particularly the global north and west, all live everyday life in consumer societies. That also links, if Vincenzo is kind of working as a grand macro, almost philosophical level about failings of the economy, do have a look at Jeff Farrell's article in the handbook, or indeed lots of Jeff Farrell's recent work about the economy of the economy linked to dumpster diving, the economy of waste. That's wonderfully ethnographic, that really shows this kind of the ground level consequences of that economy of waste production. And as I said, Bob Agnew is writing about these ordinary everyday acts that contribute to ecocide, and Danny may say a bit more about that. There's another kind of consequence. We overconsume and then dispose of the waste arising by littering everywhere from space and the oceans to our parks and streets. And Nick Greenbridge has done a nice essay for the handbook as well on that. Just the way we take for granted litter, but it's actually symbolic of so many things that are wrong with consumer society. We spoil the ground we live on, which filters our water, from which our food sprouts, by buying an incalculable amount of waste on a daily basis, some is biodegradable, some not. I'm doing a bit of work about plastic bottles and bottled water industry, which is always fascinating. And students like to hear about it, but then they hide their bottled water. They haven't really got a bottled water. If we just start to think about the amount of waste that we produce, not to say that we can all be saintly and stop it just like that, but a consciousness and awareness of our behaviour, our everyday behaviours, I think is a step that Criminology can contribute to. Transnational is simply about trying to put things on the global scale, on the global agenda. McGibbon's done some nice writing recently, suggesting we're now moving into a new geological epoch, what scientists are calling the Anthropocene, the world remade by man, he says, most obvious in emissions of carbon dioxide. And I think the consequences of this are quite interesting in terms of how we conceive of the natural world and natural disasters. So let me just read this bit. We're producing more and more carbon dioxide. That CO2 traps heat near the planet that would otherwise have radiated back to space. There is simply more energy in our atmosphere than there used to be. 2010 was the warmest year on record, and according to insurers, the people we tasked with totting up disasters, it demonstrated the unprecedented mayhem this new heat causes. Global warming was the only plausible explanation, the giant reinsurer Munich Re explained, of 2010's catastrophes, the drought, heat wave and fires across Russia, the mega floods in Pakistan, Australia, Brazil and elsewhere. All of these were plausibly connected to the general heating of the planet. They were, that is to say, not precisely natural disasters, but something more complex. The human thumb was on the scale. We are, says McGibbon, remaking the world and quickly. We are stumbling into a new way of thinking about disaster where neither God nor nature, but man, humanity, is to blame. So human-induced natural disasters were contributing to climate change and the consequences and impacts of that, will impact on agricultural productivity and hence on food availability and security across borders, and that introduces issues to do with that, environmental security and national security. And of course, we also need to think about how human planning and willingness to invest or willingness to change policies can make the consequences of disasters, natural or unnatural, even worse as well. The most obvious recent example being if you build nuclear power plants next to coastlines that are vulnerable to tsunamis, then you will have human disaster consequences. Transnational issues also raise the question of whether international laws can offer the space for protection of the environment. Can rights be constructed and upheld as applying to non-human subjects and objects? Cullinan, for example, notes that over the past few decades, a number of far-sighted commentators have drawn attention to the need for legal systems to take an evolutionary leap forward by recognising legally enforceable rights of nature and other than human beings, and he refers to this body of work as the evolution of an earth jurisprudence. And I think there's quite a lot of work developing on that related to the question of widening protection of rights to the disempowered. Could the widening rights to the fully disempowered be extended to natural objects such as trees? And Berry argues we need jurisprudence that would extend legal rights to extend rights to geological and biological components of the earth community as well. Principles of the attribution of rights are, of course, highly debatable. There's enormous controversy, and no doubt one of the latest seminars will focus on some of this. I think it's quite interesting that in the pages of New Scientist, you find these debates aired as well, where questions about should we kill for the sake of conservation, can conservation biologists do good science, saving species and ecosystems whilst also being compassionate, are aired. If you get that kind of debate in New Scientist, I think that's an indicator of the kind of breadth of debate we can have in an interdisciplinary fashion. And scientists are also saying, well, matters of ethics and justice related to species diversity need to prepare for a future where synthetic biology provides the technology to create life that has not and could not naturally have existed. And organisations like Friends of the Earth have called for a moratorium on this kind of research until proper regulation is in place. All of these lead to big and quite absolute questions, and one of the ones that I'm interested in at the moment is the development of a proposal related to something called ecocide. Some years ago, in pioneering work on the environmentally destructive impacts of the war on drugs, Rosa Del Olmo argued that historically, drug crop eradication programs should be seen as a form of state crime. I remember Nick being interested in this many, many years ago when he was in an earlier life. And it's quite an interesting perspective on what people tend to take for granted as part of the war on drugs. And actually, the war on drugs is enormously harmful to the environment and to human and other populations of species affected. And Del Olmo said, this is basically a transnational crime of broad scope, which we could call eco-biogenocide, because it involved the utilisation of a complex set of toxic chemicals which are prohibited and restricted in developed countries, but have an unlimited market in third world countries, and which the West thinks is appropriate and okay to use in programs of drug crop eradication in developing countries. They couldn't be sold in the United States, but they're okay to use in the third world where they might affect people there. The idea of eco-biogenocide, as far as I'm aware, was never really then subsequently developed, which is a shame, because I think it's quite a powerful combination of ideas and histories. But we can take up some of this power through the notion of ecocide. The UK lawyer Polly Higgins has recently been campaigning for the introduction of ecocide as a fifth international crime against peace under the Rome Statute. At the moment there are 4 crimes against peace: genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and crime of aggression, administered through the International Criminal Court. And Higgins is suggesting that we add a crime of ecocide, which I've got a definition for, but I won't go into now. But what's interesting is that the idea of a law against ecocide has a policy and political history that shows just how close it came to being accepted by the United Nations. It was really there very closely debated and discussed as the Rome Statute was being formulated. And it also ties in nicely to the way that the concept of genocide was eventually narrowed down from the original concept of genocide, because the original concept of genocide put forward by Mencken didn't just refer to the extermination of people in the way that we tend to conceive of it now, but also referred to the undermining of a way of life, a cultural genocide that led to the destruction of a territory, that led to the destruction of people through the destruction of territory and the destruction of culture. And I think the notion of an ecocide and the kinds of issues that Greek criminology is interested in an interdisciplinary fashion very much speaks to that original notion of the damage to, the mass damage to populations done through the destruction of a territory and the destruction of a culture. And that's encompassed now in this notion of ecocide. The final part of the dimension that I was going to talk about, and just leads very quickly to the final comments, was simply about the future, about intergenerational issues, where Western emphasises that the community of humankind is collectively made up of generations of the present, the past and the future, with the related implication that rights and obligations hold across this long intergenerational chain. And in this manner, the common heritage of Earth's natural resources all belong to all generations in an intertemporal partnership. So according to this view, both pragmatic reforms of law and governance as well as radical revisions need to build on recognition of respect for both the interdependence of ecosystems now and also this principle of intergenerational equity. Again, that chimes in very strongly with trends in public health thinking where public health specialists are saying, well, what will be the long-term intergenerational impacts on future generations of climate change? This isn't just something we can think about short term. This is intergenerational. This is about the future of the planet and future generations. So again, it's not just criminologists. This is an interdisciplinary subject. So we're now approaching what some scientists refer to as our planetary boundaries, the extent to which we are already over or nearing our planet's ability to cope once 9 boundaries are breached by damage. I don't know why 9, we should have found another one. They're fairly predictable: climate change, biodiversity loss and so on. And there's a lot to change and much challenging for it to respond to this crisis of planetary boundaries. And I generally do believe that the green criminology, in its own ways and in its own small ways, can make a contribution to the way that we approach or respond to this future crisis. That's it.
Questions, please. Yes, Steve, thank you.
You get it back.
Oh, sorry.
So we talked about the
I'll kick off with the last bit because I'm kind of a fascinating and exhaustive talk. It's the first time I've come across the notion, that's why I'm here today. But the area you touched upon, I'm trying to look at there's inklings of where the other big players are active in this. So from my field, which is peace and conflict research, I was trying to think about military green crimes.
Yeah.
And of course, some of them were accidental, like lethal weapon testing. Others, you mentioned Laos and the Vietnam War and creating birth defects, same as the Gulf War with weapons that were tipped with uranium. But I think that what is missing perhaps is to look at state crimes deliberately, because we've got people in Yorkshire now tracking what the military are doing in terms of evolving direct attacks on plant crops or animal crops as a means of warfare. People are very dependent on one crop. If you mimic that disease, they can take that crop out and disguise it and attack people that way. But also the genome, the whole approach to ethnic weapons and the creation of new ways. And it's just as you were speaking, it stimulated so many debates about the morality of what's going to happen. I know we're going to hear something about drones perhaps later on, but the World Society broaching the topic of melding human tissues and animals into weapons, so the weapons start thinking, particularly on drones, where we get a new generation of melding brain tissue and machines and skill systems. I think it opens up, as I mentioned, maybe we couldn't cover everything, but I think there's room for intentional state use of the environment as a means of war that could be exploited.
Yeah, well, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, one of the, again, this point about drawing on case studies that already exist and from else, well documented, like Agent Orange would be a classic one. both the assault on the environment itself there, but also the technology as an agent of war, regardless of the human casualties, is something that we can revisit through a green criminology perspective, and then bring up to date and connect with issues to do with the environment as a casualty of war, intentional or otherwise. I mean, I've been thinking about trying to do that. I think one of the classic ones that probably well researched, but I'm not aware of the literature, is depleted uranium in shells, which seems to me astonishing that there's not more controversy around that. Let's fire these shells. Oh, by the way, we'll put uranium in them as well, and forget about where they land and what the consequences might be. But the intentionality thing is, I think, also interesting, because I didn't have time to really go into that. But of course, in acts of war, there are laws against environmental destruction in wartime. If it goes on for longer than X number of days and it damages a land to it's outside of wartime, and you also have the issue of kind of non-intentionality, which is partly what the ecocide argument is trying to pick up. But in the case of Gulf of Mexico and BP oil spill, people aren't really arguing, and you have difficulty arguing that BP meant to do this, because businesses by and large don't mean to create huge environmental catastrophes that are going to cost them millions to clean up. But because they say, well, we didn't intend to do that, they will always be able to hide behind that as a defence in existing law. So the ecocide argument is about removing intentionality from the burden of proof. So I think, yes, just to respond, I think, yes, you're right, there's loads of things that we could pursue, yes. Sorry.
I was interested through the trajectory of your talk. I got the feeling that you might be turning into sort of judge and jury by the end, starting off as a purely investigative science, and then by the end you were projecting your own feelings about the environment and whatever, to the end that your discipline that you're promoting is becoming a judge and jury with preconceived preconceptions.
Well, yes, and I suppose framing it within very explicitly my journey within the critical criminology tradition would mean that one would say, yes, absolutely, because that did emerge out of a rejection of the pretense that there was neutrality in most social science endeavours. And certainly critical criminology was very much a reaction to pretense of neutrality in mainstream criminology. And I suppose it's also intellectually where enthusiasm for one subject merges with one's personal prejudices, commitments, and so on. And of course, I, as many colleagues here, also share the belief that there aren't that many more pressing issues than future of the environment and sustainability. So absolutely, it probably does come across because it's about the rallying call, really. Thank you.
Matthew?
I just thought I'd back up that point I was making, because I came to green criminology from being, still being a victimologist, where victims of crime and so on. And actually, it's interesting to see the sort of parallels, actually, that victimology is also being traditionally quite criticised by some for being rather activist, rather sometimes lacking sort of the perfect objectivity that we're often told we should have with the social sciences. And actually, interesting, one of our sort of main leaders, like that young Van Dyke, has said that it's something we should embrace, this sort of interaction between activism and NGOs and academics. And I think I see the same thing sort of developing actually in criminology here, actually, where actually it's I think it's almost an aspect of the interdisciplinarity that we sort of kind of interact with people that have very different kind of non-academic agendas and see what they have to offer as a debate as well. So I think it can be made a good thing as well as shall we say, an academic.
Well, I think it could be a good thing in terms of driving the intellectual agenda and campaigning to promote issues and making an impact, after all. making a public impact is about drawing attention to things that people don't necessarily know about. But I also think that it's just really hard to avoid that. You can believe in something called the evidence base, but if you've ever tried to engage in political and policy influencing constituency games play, which years ago I used to do work around drugs, there are many evidence bases, and ministers, politicians of various types will generally have their own prejudices and looking for particular kinds of evidence base. So yes, absolutely, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do good science, you shouldn't use good evidence alongside your passionately held and slightly biased arguments. But we shouldn't fool ourselves that other people somewhere over there are doing something purer and less biased, because of course they're doing producing a different evidence base from their point of view.
Yeah,
Thanks for that talk. It's really interesting. I'm completely new to criminology, so it might be a really simple question, but I think it follows on a little bit from what was being discussed about, especially about the point about being judge and jury, and the way that criminology necessarily states what is a crime and what isn't, in the debate around that. And my interests are in international development. I wondered how green criminology is connected with international development, modern history, how it's trying to work out how poverty is a motivating factor or not, how justice is a motivating factor or not in green crimes, especially around wildlife crimes or around habitat destruction, which I noticed is the areas.
Well, others can probably say more about the debates around trying to impose top-down conservation-oriented policies that come into conflict with everyday sustainability practices. Tanya and Alice and others want to chip in there. In relation to the international development agenda and poverty of nations, there's a very interesting set of body of work in political science, but I think we're beginning to borrow it for green criminology as well, related to the resource curse of developing countries, and the idea that resource-rich countries, that the resource richness doesn't necessarily benefit the population back home. It might benefit multinational corporations that are involved in resource extraction. It might benefit ruling elites. It benefits consumers in developed nations that reap the benefits of the resources that are extracted. It doesn't necessarily ameliorate poverty or lack of infrastructure and access to education and so on, or population back home. The Democratic Republic of Congo and resources extracted from there is a good example. So I think there are some strongly well-known areas of working debate in the international politics and development literature that are now being kind of revisited from a green criminology perspective. Does anyone want to chip in about because I know some people have done work about trying to control both things like logging and even work in Cambodia and wildlife trade when that goes against the grain of everyday practice. Young people are better qualified to chip in.
Well, there is some literature too, though, coming out of NGOs that there's more of a connection between consumption and wealth rather than consumption and poverty. That it's wealth in different areas that's driving destruction and use of natural resources, rather than the poverty of the local people. There's certainly a connection between poverty and poaching or illegal logging. There is some minimal devastation caused by that, but some good reports coming out, particularly by traffickers, actually saying that